This is A.M. Skeffington talking to the clinical associates of the optometric extension program on a matter very close to my own heart. That is the basis for dynamic refraction techniques. The Institutes for Continuing Adult Study from time to time issue a study outline. It contains a summary of the current thinking in that discipline or profession. Such a thumbnail sketch is here given. It extends from the days of the simplest of technologies that could truly be said to fall within the definition of optometry. It carries on to the practice today which shows when the laws of optometry were written without our knowing it, we fenced in a large part of human behavior. This outline is set up in a study plan form. Each paragraph or section could be a short chapter in the final textbook, Optometry, the Official Discipline of Vision. It is divided into sections for pause and reflection. In effect, the short, concise survey of functional, operational, analytical optometry. The basic concept, the optometric extension program has always held that all cases for vision care should be sent to the optometrist. It believed that he should be the recognized vision specialist in his community. The visual problem from early childhood to advanced age should be sent to him. Optometry is clinically oriented. That is, optometry is a remedial profession. To be of value to it, vision studies must deal with matters that relate to office practice. The optometric extension program has gathered data from its own and all allied fields. This combined data have done much to promote improved vision care. There's always been a modification of clinical data. The man in practice early found the need to devise a method of modifying the refractive status findings. These were at first pure rule of thumb, arrived at as a result of bitter experience. Some of these rules were, A, when half a diopter or less of hyperopia is shown, give no lenses. When 3/4 of a diopter or more is shown, cut the plus 37/100ths of a diopter for each found. C, with a new patient, a myope, give minus only to 20/30. D, when cylinder with the rule is found, cut by the same proportion as hyperopia. And E, when cylinder is against the rule, cut only half as much. These rules applied only in a certain proportion of cases. Their failure in others led to the accommodative convergence concept of lens modification. There must be a source of procedures. Most of the techniques used in optometry have evolved out of the work with adults. In these adults, the findings were, as a rule, quite stable. Often the lenses based on these stable findings would not be worn. Whether or not the prescription would be worn depended on many other things. These many other things are the basis for this summary. Contributions of other fields. As optometry grew, data obtained from other fields corroborated its data. Events within the profession also increased the knowledge about what lenses the patient would accept. Research in the field of child development brought insight into vision. Gissell, Magnus, Piaget, and many others show that all the processes by which man sees and gets meaning out of this world are learned. The baby is born with the neurological and physiological mechanisms that allow him to get started. From then on, he must learn to increase and expand these skills. From these sources comes the evidence that man must learn to see. As Ronke says, this marvelous skill of seeing shapes, form, and colors is learned. How well this skill is learned, and the manner in which the learning of these processes depart from the optimum are the province of optometry. In the mechanisms of vision, Duke Elder shows that the retina is composed of anatomical quadrants. This provides the neural basis for convergence, but its control has to be learned. Studies by optometrists and others have shown that the very young child has a very large range of accommodation, up to approximately 12 diopters. The infant must learn or evolve control of these skills. The amount of these two functions must be held within workable limits. These skills come into proper controlled relationship with each other as part of the orderly development of the infant. This permits all visual learning to proceed in good order. There's a concept of protective function. Optometric data showed that the hyperopia's normal role is to protect the accommodative skill which lets man resolve and get meaning. It also showed that exophoria cushions the convergence function by which alignment is maintained. Studies revealed that the norm for man is about 3/4 of a diopter hyperopia at far point. Likewise, he should show about a half a prism diopter of exophoria at far point and about 6 prism diopters of exophoria at near point. These findings placed in doubt the long-held idea that emetropia and orthophoria are states to be desired. The optometric data opened the door for wide scope of research in schools and industry. Research shows that seeing is learned. The problem facing the optometrist is how is it learned and what is seen. There was a premise of the American Optometric Association, and it published premise. The AOA stated that A, optometry is a unique profession, B, it's concerned with functional vision. The ideas outlined up to this point are the basis for the system of extended adult education the Optometric Extension Program presents. Functional vision, a dynamic operation, not limited to the physics optics of the eye itself. The fundamental concept, the concept of a space world. Research in child development show that vision is developed mainly through the sense of touch. The youngster first learned to perform at near simply because it is near. Far point is an extension of what has been begun at near. The space world consists of at least two spaces. One, near space, within reach of the manipulating hands. And two, far space, beyond the reach of his hands. Near space in lens application. The key role of near space point to the need to emphasize the near space measurements. The idea of eye measuring slowly gave way to more advanced concepts. Data gathered in office practice made it plain that the patient's near point status decides whether he will accept the lens supplied. The rule, never supply a single vision lens for constant wear greater than the near net, sprang from office and research data. Extensive motion pictures of the effect of convex lenses have been made at the Radiological Institute. They support the ideas evolved and applied in practice. Stress and the refractive status. Hans Selye has shown the effects of maintained stress upon the functions and structure of living creatures. Long before he published, the Optometric Extension Program showed that time and stress affect refractive findings. The sequence of syndromes of deterioration of a B-type case was taught and applied in practice. The concept of the role of the effector system was developed by men such as Selye, Sperry, Renshaw, Hebb, Harmon, Halstead, and many others. This verified the teachings of the Optometric Extension Program. It stressed the interrelation between the body's neuromuscular system and the eye's refractive status. Optometry is a growing field. Optometry's interests grow as progress was made in its research and that of allied fields. Problems dealing with vision that had lacked answers could now be solved. The courses of study of the Optometric Extension Program show how these approaches are applied. 4 growing phases of office practice. First, the visual problems are seen in the preschool and early school child. 2, children of school age having visual problems that have been labeled as over-referral cases by non-optometric refractionists. 3, adults whose refractive status is almost the same as the values of the lenses now being worn may have problems. They need the help of the optometrist working in the field of functional vision. And 4, adults may complain of discomfort when their real visual problem is that of early presbyopia. The answers to these problems in the program: 1, the Optometric Extension Program course, Optometric Child Vision Care and Guidance, deal with the first class of cases. 2, the second class of cases, that of the retarded reader. The role of vision in failure to achieve in school is just coming into its own. The Optometric Extension Program, pioneer in this field, will continue to develop it. And 3, the third and fourth classes of trouble are studied in the courses of the Optometric Extension Program. Only the dynamic functional concept can solve these problems. The wisdom of the profession. As progress was made, the need arose for a clearinghouse to gather and disperse information throughout the profession. Everything given out through the Optometric Extension Program for clinical application in the profession go through such a clearinghouse. The methods taught in the Optometric Extension Program and the language used are the combined work of many optometrists. Each procedure presented in lecture or courses of study has been tested over a period of time by optometrists. This outline has been reviewed by many optometrists before it was released to you. The sequence of findings. It early became clear that the analytical examination findings were psychometric. Psychometric, as used here, means that the findings result from activity within the person. They are not just measurements of a passed amount or size. Such findings, to be valid, must be made in a certain sequence. A table of norms is needed with which the findings can be compared. The members of the profession have supplied such a table through their experience. The table of norms of the Optometric Extension Program has stood the test of statistical reliability by the late Dean Petrie of Rochester, by Renshaw, by the late Carr Shepard, and others. The table has been labeled the expecteds. This was due to the use of minimums. That is, instead of appending a spread or range of findings, the minimum was used. It facilitated clinical analysis. When the measurements approached or dropped below that amount, stated in the table of expected, it was considered clinically significantly low. The analytical examination used by the Optometric Extension Program studies performance. A rigid mechanistic system, on the other hand, could not permit the dynamics of vision to be understood. For communication in the profession, the analytical examination techniques as evolved by Skeffington and Associates were labeled by their order in an examining sequence. Calling the findings by number saved time and made for easy exchange of data. The term positive fusion reserve and 16B are labels for a method of taking a certain finding or measurement. Since the term positive relative convergence had different meaning at different schools at the time the profession was formulating its methodology, it became expedient to develop a common tongue. The necessity also existed of establishing an ordered method of examination. The labeling of techniques by their proper place in an ordered sequence of examination was the simple solution to both problems. The flexibility of numbers is infinitely greater than word labels, as every student of mathematics knows. The analytical examination is an ordered procedure based on sound psychometric principles with all the real reliability of interpretation that any table of probabilities gives any mathematician. The order of the examination led to syndromes that are the mark of a profession. In acceptance of lenses, the concept of the visual problem starts at near point was treated in a previous section. The lenses the patient accepts have their remedial value at near point. The classical concept was that lenses correct an assumed refractive error at far point. The true error at far point was thought to be revealed by the dynamic retinoscope studies of Andrew J. Cross, Edwin Forbes Tate, Charles Sheard. The modern optometric approach is to determine the lens power the patient will accept at near, and then weigh the convenience of wearing it at far. This concept, conveyed to the optometric extension program, has spurred the use of bifocals for children. The non-optometric journals also now endorse this. It evolved in optometry and was dispersed to the optometric extension program. The demand is near point. Hyperopia and exophoria have been shown to be protective processes. The need arose to find methods for learning their proper amounts at near. The crossed cylinders and their related phorias provided such a method. The crossed cylinders present an artificial interval of stern. The target provides lines which permit degrees of resolution to be compared. Spheres can move the interval of stern forward or backward. In this way, they can affect the blackness of the target lines. When the lines of the target are equally clear, the best resolution has been obtained. It is just as important to learn where the patient places the target in space. The induced phoria supplies this answer. Exophoria show the target as being placed away. Esophoria show this being stationed nearer. If the target placement is away, some amount of the hyperopia measured is due to this. The shift of centering away in space releases a certain amount of the total identification process, for the target is not moved in space. This portion must be subtracted from the crossed cylinder gross. The amount subtracted is known as lag of accommodation. The gross cross-cylinder finding less the lag of accommodation results in the crossed cylinder net. The net, which is in effect the hyperopia at near, is a safeguard. It may be viewed as a survival function at near, just as the hyperopia of the subjective is at far. Its function is to protect the proper working of accommodation. Hyperopia at near or far is deemed an error only when it exceeds certain most useful limits as a person adapts to maintained stress. Lenses which correct the hyperopia, near or far, have value in the degree they meet the demand to localize away. Hyperopia has been observed to act as a defense or reserve. That such a reserve aids survival was shown by optometry in the late 1920s. Studies in the 30s confirmed and advanced the views that had been derived in office practice. Research in the 40s showed that hyperopia decreased under the stress of problem solving. Up to that time, problem solving had been considered a purely mental act. Its connection with vision had not been stressed, if indeed it had even been realized. Further studies in the 50s showed that hyperopia varied with the equilibrium state of the total body system, that it could be absorbed, for it was expendable. Every optometrist in practice is faced with the question of how many findings are needed. He must obtain enough data to learn what the problem is and what can be done with it. The refractive status at far or 20 feet can be measured quite simply. The criterion of what lenses the patient will accept is based on the visual functioning at near point. The optometrist who thinks in terms of function is set apart by this concept from the non-optometric refractionists or the opticers of Europe. Vision, thought of in this way, is dynamic. This outline has stressed the fact that seeing is learned, that a visual problem starts at near and spreads to far. Kurt Goldstein says that an impairment in one area of a performance spreads the total performance. Man is built to meet stresses which last a short time. When it persists through time, stress brings adaptations. The analytical examination, as taught by the optometric extension program, makes it possible to learn the effects of stress. The adaptation to it affect the lenses the patient will accept. A low 16B, that is based out to break at near, does not show whether the full plus power at near will be accepted. This can only be determined when the far point reductions are also known. This outline has dealt with the continued stress as it affects optometric vision care. In office practice, the concept has been labeled embedding. The term used in this way means that the process of adaptation to the stress has gone on for a long time. Relatively fixed, emphatic changes in structure result. These changes are shown in the syndromes that direct lens application. As the first response to stress, the survival processes are absorbed. Hyperopia drops, exophoria decrease. The findings show marked changes. As a rule, the recoveries go quite low. As the process of adaptation takes place, the profile of the case in time looks more normal. At this stage, it is harder to arrive at the lenses that can be supplied with success, for they are defined by the syndromes built from the experiences of the profession. Survival skills are absorbed. The previous sections have referred to changes in the survival skills. These skills, which serve to protect the sustained visual response of the person, are expendable. The most clearly observed of these skills are hyperopia, to protect accommodation, and exophoria, to protect convergence. They undergo constant change as a result of the varied states of stress which affect the organism. Stress, as a rule, brings a transient drop in findings. The drop in the level at which the person achieves is shown on any task he attempts. The most definite research in this matter is that of V.I. Shipman, Ph.D. She made a study of the effects of stress on children. Her results were reported. They summed up in the statement that, under stress, there is a constriction of all the perceptual fields. The child observes less, sees less, remembers less, learns less, and becomes generally less efficient. Summed up, this indicates the child under stress will learn less. The book Retinoscope Findings, initiated the Clinic of Child Development at Yale University by G.N. Getman, the continued investigation of Gesell Institutes by Appel and Straff, completely confirmed the earlier investigations. Finally, the study shown in photographic form, but not yet published, by D.B. Harmon, Ph.D., at the Radiological Group at Austin, Texas, and the confirmatory studies at the Mental Health Center at Baylor University by Homer F. Weir, M.D., all confirm the fact that when the child is under stress, there is a change in retinoscope findings. These are accompanied by changes in the other findings of the analytical examination. If this fleeting first drop could be measured, 4 notable changes would be observed. 1, static retinoscope finding would be very low. 2, the crossed cylinder findings would show a marked drop. 3, exophoria far and near would show a big drop. And 4, the recoveries of all affected ductions would be very low. As stress persists through time, the changes as measured can be relied on, and then a syndrome is found. The findings that bore the first impact of the stress are the ones that become low. Function alters structure. From this emerges one of the notable lens-fitting syndromes of optometry, that of the non-embedded visual problem. This syndrome contains both far and near findings. Derived from it is the vital lens-fitting directive. The plus given for near should be in excess of the values found at the near point. The visual problem becomes embedded. It has been stated that optometry used the concept of time and stress before it had been published in many other fields. As a visual problem, patterns of response become embedded. The wholly altered syndrome emerges, which requires a quite changed lens-fitting approach. When this syndrome of embeddedness is found, the lens fitting rule is to cut plus at all points, far and near. The clinical optometry course of the optometric extension program discusses case samples of this type problem. Vision and the efferent processes were referred to in a previous section, and where reference is made to neurological and physiological findings from Duke Elder. It also mentions that the infant begins life with great flexibility in the visual systems. These same sections cite the limits of function the infant must learn. Recent studies in biology have shown beyond a doubt that all the senses are closed energy sequences. This is the input, integration, output, feedback sequence. Vernon said that vision develops under the tutelage of the active touch. This matter of development of vision through touch was discussed in a previous section. Man involves two important skills. One, the skill of knowing where a thing seen is placed in relation to the total visual space world, that is, centering. Two, the ability to gather, use, and combine knowledge from present and past experiences, that is, identification. Centering is the knowledge of where things are in space. Identification, the knowledge of what things in space are. The concept of a continuum is applied. The methods outlined provide a knowledge of how the case looked in the past, what it likely will look like in the future unless proper steps are taken. It also supplies information as to what these steps should be. It allows one to understand why the exact findings of the refractive status are so often not acceptable to the patient. Data is obtained from three syndromes: typing, adaptation, or embedding, and spatial organization. It allows one to predict whether the patient will accept or reject the projected plus or cylindrical lenses. It also indicates when it is helpful to prescribe more or less than the value shown in the findings. The extent of the need for visual training is learned from the syndromes of embedding and spatial organization. These syndromes show whether such training can be dispensed with, when it should be advised, and when it is greatly needed. The optometrist now, for the first time, can outline a program of visual care through life. He can project this knowledge to early years and lay out for the parent a program of preventive visual care for the child. This approach lends itself to suitable vision care of children. The concept of vision as an effect or process permits one to understand the visual problem of the emmetrope. It opens great new vistas of cooperation with this country's school people. One great value is this approach creates enthusiastic patients. They are happy to come to you, for they are delighted with the results. They know you understand their problems. Your grasp of procedures rids them of problems with which they came in, and let them build skills they have not had in the past. These values accrue as a result of the optometrist gaining the skills that let him understand case typing, how to apply the syndromes of embedding and spatial organization, in short, how to prescribe with success. And so, as a summary, let us say the optometrist gains from a dynamic concept of vision many things. One, he applies vision care to children from the very young through school age. Two, he learns the real visual needs of emmetrope, who, as a rule, is a retarded reader. Three, he understands the development of a visual problem. He knows what it was like 5 years ago, why it is where it is now, and what it will likely look like 5 years from now. A, if proper vision care is not given, and B, if proper vision care is given. 4, the optometrist programs vision care through life, from early childhood to the impact of age on visual performance. And 5, he understands the reasons for visual training. He knows the degree of need and can direct an effective program. The optometric extension program is well-rounded. The student who limits himself to technical aspects is depriving himself. He needs to know office management, practice building, office-centered public relations, the role of reading in optometric practice and the professional use of contact lenses. He should have a knowledge of visual training as put forth by the optometric extension program. These, with the expanded knowledge of refraction, allow the optometrist to predict what the person's visual problem was in the past. What is found today tells what the problem will be like tomorrow. This takes the place of a slice through time, a static, fixed error with the living man left out. Here is the way to create enthusiastic patients, not just satisfied ones. Here is the means of lifting the practitioner's status and stature in the community. It brings the material rewards that give pride in accomplishments.